So today, 10 years to the day after my mother's death, today I start a new life. Today I claim all of the nightmares as my own, as part of my journey. I turn around, I stare them down, and I tell them that together we have work to do. They move over today, and I take the driver's seat. I've worked hard, and I'm strong enough to reframe my own narrative. Today I miss my mom more than usual. Today I forgive her all her trespasses, and I commit myself to marrying her voice to my own. My mother's voice was warm, never red hot, never ever cold. It often said darling or sweetheart. I will never forget my mother's voice. She loved Monty Python. She was very funny. She took her silly seriously. She liked her humor dry and her wine dry. She was an avid reader, and she enjoyed the opera. My mother was great with words. She wrote witty poems for birthdays and retirements. Imperfectly, she loved her 6 kids. She adored her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren. My mom was great with babies and lousy with teenagers. She had a huge group of friends, and she was an outstanding listener. My mother's voice invited conversation, laughter, stories, and jokes. It asked for and offered hugs. It was a cozy blanket. It was a loving embrace. A warm voice is temperate, even. It rarely whispers, and it doesn't shout. It moderates. It knows its place. To be sure, there was volume and passion inside my mother, but she never spoke it aloud. Mostly, my mother and her friends worked at stoking the home fires, monitoring the flames, careful not to spark anything that might spread. At 85, my mother, having lived a good, warm life, having raised 6 kids, having buried a husband and lost another great love. At 85, my mother, although in relatively good health, was tired. She had run a marathon, and she was pleased with her result. It was her personal best. It seems unbearably, inhumanely cruel that as she broke the ribbon, exhausted but overwhelmingly relieved to be at the finish line, life looked at my mother and said, "Yes, you finished your marathon, and yes, you ran well, but I am going to tack a 10K onto the end of this race. Buckle up, Buttercup." It was too much to ask. She didn't have it in her. It is deeply sad but not surprising that in the last 2 years of her life, my beautiful mother, the epitome of warmth in every way, was always cold and could never rid herself of a persistent, icy chill. In those last years, my mother had something to say, something important. Her thoughts were perfectly lucid, and her message was clear. But she had lost her voice. There was a persistent, dark cloud above and around her, and it threatened every day to extinguish her friendly flame. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that my mother had words inside of her that she longed to share with the world, to shout from the rooftops, but she had run her race, and she had hit the wall, a place where your body shuts down and no longer does what you ask it to do. The chasm between willing and able becomes deep and deeper, and then finally impossible to cross. But I was there years earlier when my mother read about feminism and felt the stirrings of her own revolution from within. I was there when, as a nurse, she pioneered a strike for better pay. I wore the NDP t-shirt that said "Tomorrow starts today," and I was mocked for it at my conservative upper-middle-class school. But I believed what she believed. I watched her posture change as she took a class called assertiveness training. I was at the bank with her when she opened her own checking account. I became an athlete. My mother marveled at my strong body, uncomfortable and unsure if and how to celebrate it, but still kind of in awe. She came to my games, and she never shouted, never cheered, she just watched. She watched me as I had watched her. I became a pioneer in my own right. First girls soccer team, first girls hockey team, first provincial team, first varsity team. She watched, and she listened as my voice grew. She witnessed my emerging womanhood and the empowerment accompanying it as it took shape. She came to love my strength, both physical and mental. She traveled with me and egged me on as I opened doors. She called me strong and smart and capable and amazing. She told me over and over that I could rule the world. And so, having been raised within the lilting soundtrack of my mother's warmth, as her sixth child, I find myself at midlife with my mother's voice inside of me. But it has changed. It has taken on power, and so, like it or not, I find myself now with the voice of a warrior. My words burn my throat, but I am not afraid of fire, and I will take my mother's muted passions and ignite them. I will find a place in this world for her scream. Because we ask people at the end of a life well lived to do the impossible when they are tired and want their well-earned, well-deserved rest. We refuse to give it to them as some kind of sick, unfathomable punishment. We move the finish line. We define quality of life and demand that our loved ones keep going, keep running, even when they have hit the wall, even when they are stumbling and suffering. My mother's message is this: give us ownership over our lives and our deaths. Offer us the same humane compassion you bring to your cats and your dogs. Don't ask us to suffer. When we are done, when we tell you we are done, let us go. Say a loving goodbye and let us go to sleep in your arms. I can barely say these words. My beautiful, smart, funny, kind mother died alone and cold, ice cold. I was not yet strong enough to insist for her, to come to her rescue and fight her battle for her. I was one of the ones telling her that she could run another 10K, insisting that she had it in her. She asked meekly about her own mother, who'd been asked to run another 10K after the marathon. We were asking her to keep running a race with no foreseeable finish line. You see, the average life expectancy in Canada is 84 for women. It's 80 for men. We now have laws in place that offer a peaceful, pain-free death for those whose death is imminent. This is what my mother wanted me to scream. I am 87. I am tired. I have run a good race and then some. My dying is imminent, and I'm okay with that. I want to go gently into the good night. Let others run marathons long into their 90s and their hundreds. Past 100 if their bodies and minds and spirits are still willing. Good for them. I do not want my family's resources or my government's resources directed at me anymore. Use them for the old who are still running the race. Use them for the young. I decline. I am ready to go to sleep. Let me go. My mother's voice is shedding its shackles, merging with my own. Her warmth is my kindling. I am on fire, and I will rage like a warrior with her message as my battle cry. Pave the final road. I love you, Mama.